Hey, how's it going? It's Russell. In this video, we are going to be making an absolute raw food classic. I've been wanting to make this video for some time now. Raw lasagna. Okay, so there's actually quite a few ways you can make raw lasagna. The recipe I'm giving you here, wherever you're seeing this video, there's a link to the recipe. But in this video, we're going to be fermenting the cheese. So we're going to be using macadamias to ferment into cheese. And you can do it without the fermentation stage, but if you're going to make this dish, it's not an everyday dish by any means. So you might as well go the whole hog, the full mile, and ferment those macadamias into a cheese because it's just so much nicer. We've got a pesto layer, we've got a tomato sauce layer, and we've got like a walnut meat layer as well, which that walnut meat layer you can add in, to make it a little bit more meaty, you can add in mushrooms like portobello mushrooms in there as well. But I'm trying to make it as simple as I can, even though it's got a few different elements to it. So let's start off with that macadamia cheese. We're going to get some macadamias, and they're soaked. They've been soaked overnight, ideally, because it makes them more digestible, and it also gives them a bit more of a neutral flavour. So into the Vitamix with those. Then we're going to add in some water and some probiotics. Now, the number one question I get asked is, what probiotics should I use? And my answer is always, it doesn't matter. You can use any probiotics. If you can only get acidophilus on its own, that's fine too. I like to go for ones that it's just a powder in a jar, so you can scoop it. But if you can only get capsules, then just pull the capsules apart. All of those options will work really nicely. So we're going to blend that up, and you might need to add a little bit of extra water. Whenever I'm following a recipe like that, even if it's my own, I never put in all the water in one go. So if it calls for a cup of water, I might do a half to 3/4 of a cup, because it always depends on how much water your soaked macadamias have taken on. So get it blending, and then if it's not blending properly, it should blend nice and smooth and vortex in like you can see here. So add all of the water up until this point, when it vortexes in on itself. And if you needed just a touch more water, just do like a tablespoon or more, around a tablespoon at a time until it does this. Now we want to set up some kind of contraption in the kitchen, depending on what you've got, with a bowl, some kind of straining device like a colander or a sieve, and then some kind of material, whether that's cheesecloth or whether it's a nut milk bag. Nut milk bags actually are my preference, they work really well. We're going to set that up, and then we're going to pour in the macadamia cheese, and we're going to cover that up, put a weight on it so that it just gets rid of any excess water, and then we're going to put that in a warm place overnight for about 12 hours. After 12 hours, what you're going to see here is that you've got a nicely fermented cheese, or a fermented first stage cheese. And underneath you're going to get that whey. So it's the water with a little bit of the blended nuts in there, and it's got lots of probiotics in there. It does kind of look, it looks grim sometimes, but it's actually really full of nutrition. So keep hold of it. You can put it into a glass. You can use that to start off your next batch if you want, in place of water, or half the whey, half water in your next batch. And you can also use it in smoothies. So definitely something to keep. It will keep I've kept it for a couple of weeks in the fridge, because there's so much good bacteria in there, it really doesn't go off. It just gets more and more fermented as time goes on. So throw that into your nut milks, your smoothies, whatever it is that you're making. All right, so back to the cheese. You'll notice when we take it out the cheesecloth here that it's actually much firmer. It breaks apart, and if you look in the middle there, you can see it's aerated. Like there's lots of little bubbles in there. It's definitely firmed up because we've got rid of some of the excess water that came out as whey, and it holds together much nicer. So we're going to transfer that to a bowl, and then we're going to add in a few other ingredients in this second stage. The first thing we're going to go in with is some lemon juice, and then we're going to also add some garlic powder, some onion powder, and some nutritional yeast. And the nutritional yeast is in flakes here, so we're just crumbling it up as it goes in. And then we're going to add a little bit of salt, nice Celtic sea salt, something like that, a grey salt with the minerals still intact, not a white table salt. So in with that before we start to mix. So get your hands in there, mix it up, get it all nicely incorporated, and then put that to one side. Next up, we're going to make a beautiful fresh tomato sauce with a mixture of fresh tomatoes and sun-dried tomatoes. So cut up some fresh tomatoes into the Vitamix with those, and then we've got these beautiful dark deep red sun-dried tomatoes that they come in a packet, so they're not the ones that come in oil, because those can have other ingredients and preservatives in them. So we're looking for the ones that come dry in packets. We soak them just to make them soft. It's not like soaking the nuts. We soak the nuts because of the nutritional aspect of soaking them, gets rid of the anti-nutrients. But the sun-dried tomatoes, we're just doing it to get them a little bit softer. So about 30 minutes is all that's needed. You could do that in slightly warm water. It will speed things up a little bit. And then a rough chop on those before we put those into the Vitamix. Now we're going to sweeten this up a little bit with some dates, a nice beautiful whole foods natural sweetener. So just 2 dates, you could do 1 or you could do 3 if you like it a little bit sweeter, but 2 dates is the sweet spot there. We've got these beautiful medjool dates, so we're going to take the stones out of those, rough chop, pop them in, follow that up with some garlic, some lemon juice, and also some dried mixed Italian herbs. And then the final thing is just a touch of olive oil before we get it blended up so it's nice and smooth. It's still going to be a little bit chunky because of the nature of those sun-dried tomatoes. It's going to be quite thick, but blend it up just to the thickness and the chunkiness that you desire. Okay, then we're on to some pesto. So we're going to make some gorgeous fresh pesto. Let's get a whole bunch of, a couple of bunches actually of fresh basil, chopped up roughly and into the food processor this time because we want to leave it a little bit chunky rather than blend everything down, which the high-speed blender tends to make everything nice and smooth. So food processor for this one. So basil in, some finely chopped garlic, and then some pine nuts, a good helping of pine nuts, some salt, and I like to follow that with some nutritional yeast as well, which is totally optional, but I like the cheesy flavour. And then of course some lemon juice and olive oil before we grind that up and pulse it up and get it nice and chunky. Again, you know, you can just do that to the smoothness or the chunkiness, the texture that you prefer for your pesto. Okay, we're almost there with all of our layers. We're now going to do the walnut meat layer. So we've got some soaked walnuts here. Again, we're going to do this in the food processor. So walnuts in the food processor, some more sun-dried tomatoes, again they've been soaked and chopped, into the food processor. And then we're going to add one of my favourite ingredients actually for getting a real nice depth of flavour, and that is a nice dark miso, either a brown rice or a barley miso, which is also really salty as well. And then we want some tamari and then some lemon juice. And then we're going to grind this up, get it pulsed up. Again, choose the texture that you want. I find a nice kind of rough, chunky mixture is great. It's going to sit inside that lasagna perfectly. Okay, the last 2 elements we need to do, just the last 2 quick elements here are the courgette or zucchini, which we're going to make the lasagna, like the pasta strips with. And then we need to do the spinach as well. I like to add in a bit of wilted spinach, which is optional, but it really makes for a nice mouthfeel and extra flavor in there. So the zucchini or courgette, we need to cut those down so they're about the length or just longer than the length of your longest finger, I would say. So get those cut down. You can kind of get a sense of where we're cutting them here. You can see how long they are. And then once you've got your pieces of courgette, you're going to get those onto a mandolin and get them cut nice and fine. Now, if you haven't got a mandolin, you can do this with a ribbon peeler. You can get them just right. And when I say nice and thin, you don't want them too thin. You don't want them wilting down. We're not going to add any salt to this either. And we're just going to leave them so that they will sit in each level of the lasagna and they will hold together. So not too thin, but certainly thinner than you would probably cut them with a knife. So use a mandolin or a ribbon peeler ideally. Then we're going to get to our spinach. So spinach, a bit of salt on there, massage it up, get it wilted down really thoroughly. Get all of that excess liquid out of there because we are actually going to build these lasagnas individually, but you can totally build them in a baking dish as well if you want to. And the key to doing that is to make sure that you get as much of the water out of all the ingredients as you can if you're building the baking dish version, because what you'll find is that if you don't do that, you'll just have a puddle of water when it will last several days in the fridge. And if you come to cut a slice out after it's come out of the fridge and you're just taking it out of a puddle of water, that's no fun. So we're going to really get the water out of this spinach. You can see here, squeezing it until you get actually quite a lot of liquid out, and then arrange it on the board and just kind of pull it apart, and that's ready to go. Okay, this is the fun part. The really fun part is putting this thing together, and as I said, we're building them individually because this just looks so good. But if you're making this as more of an everyday meal for family and friends, or you're taking it to a potluck or something like that, or you're contributing it to a dinner party, for sure put it in a baking dish and make one big lasagna that can be cut into. But this is how you make it individually, and obviously you can just tailor this to do it in a baking dish. We're going to put 4 strips of zucchini or courgette down and slightly overlap them. Next, we're going to go on with our first layer, which is the tomato sauce. So you obviously want to be quite gentle here with the tomato sauce so that you're not moving those courgette pieces around. Then we're going to crumble on some of that cheese, and I definitely find this is easier to do with by hand rather than a spoon, but whatever way works for you. Next, we're going to go on with some of that walnut meat. So crumble that on again, same as you did with the cheese. Next is the pesto, and ideally, I mean, you can do these in whatever order you want to. This order I found is the best. Doing the tomato sauce first to hold those courgette pieces together, and then everything seems to go nicely on top. And then we're going to scatter on some of that beautiful wilted spinach, and then we've got a couple of fresh pieces of tomato here, cut nice and thin. Overlap those. It's so nice to get those fresh ingredients, the spinach and the tomato in there whole, on top of, you know, all of the other kind of blended and food processed ground down stuff that we've put in there as well. I like to just finish that off with just a couple of grinds of black pepper. That's our first layer done. So we're going to, on top of all of that, put another 4 strips of courgette or zucchini. And what you want to do here is, you can see they're overlapped again, but they're facing a different direction, right? So if our first zucchini were facing that way, then our second layer is going to be facing this way. Just seems to give it a little bit more stability so that when you're serving it, it just holds together really nicely. All right, so let's run through this quickly again. Tomato sauce, cheese layer, then the ground walnut meat layer, some of that gorgeous freshly made homemade pesto, some spinach, and then another couple of slices of beautiful ripe fresh tomato on top of that. Top that off with another couple of grinds of black pepper and another layer of those courgette or zucchini. Okay, so you could garnish this just really simply with some fresh tomato. What we are doing here is doing a canal of macadamia cheese. So a canal is created, as you can see here, by pulling, just actually taking a little bit of the macadamia cheese on a wet spoon and making sure that you're keeping your spoons wet, because you'll get a much nicer glide to the spoons doing that, and you're pulling it towards you. If you've never done this before, it does take some practice. You can probably find, I'm sure, other videos teaching you how to canal separately from this, but it's a fun little skill. It's a useful little skill to have, because as you can see here, it makes this beautiful canal of macadamia cheese. And then we're going to top that. We've made this these beautiful finely or small diced fresh tomatoes. We removed the seeds, just the outer part of the tomato, finely diced or a small dice, and mix that in with some chiffonade of basil. Just makes a beautiful topping over there. Maybe a little bit of black pepper on the top, and then as you can see here, some olive oil, or what would be really so fantastic is some truffle oil, which I think is what we did around the outside. Truffle oil around the outside, oh, just finishes that off so well. All right, that's it. It's a classic raw food dish. Like I say, it's got a few elements to it. It's a bit of a project, but you know what? Making cooked lasagna, I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's a bit of a project too. So give this a go. It's an absolute classic. You may even have heard of raw food because of raw lasagna. It's been out there for years. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Click a thumbs up if you liked it, and subscribe to my channel, because you'll be notified first of any new recipes. Especially if you click the little bell, you'll get a notification to say when we've posted some more raw food recipes. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.